please be seated? Will you join me in prayer? Gracious God, we pray that you would open us up this morning, that you would open our eyes to see, that you would open our ears and our hearts to hear the voice of the Good Shepherd, and that you would open our hands to go out into the world and serve. Amen. I don't know if you've noticed, but God has kind of a thing for shepherds. Even in the very beginning, Abel, Cain's brother, was a shepherd who brought to God as an offering the finest of his flock. A little later, Abraham prospers as a shepherd in the land that God leads him to, as does Abraham's grandson, Jacob. Moses herded sheep for 40 years before going back to Egypt to do whatever it was he did down there. And then David, the youngest of his brothers, was a shepherd until Samuel came and turned him into a king. And even at Jesus' birth, the only ones who were invited besides family were the shepherds from the fields surrounding Bethlehem. Now, you could argue, I guess, if you wanted to, that as the New Testament rolls along, fishing supplants shepherding as the divine vocation of choice, right? Most of the disciples, Jesus' disciples, were fishermen. Maybe God's doctor sat him down one day and said, "Look, your cholesterol's gotten high. Got to lay off the lamb chops. I suggest some fish and vegetables would be better for you." But in the Gospel of John that we heard from today, in the Gospel of John, where Jesus reveals his divine nature through a series of I am statements. I am the light of the world. I am the bread of life. I am the true vine. It's the image of the Good Shepherd that he latches onto, that he chooses to tell us about God, not the good bass fisherman. I am the Good Shepherd, and the Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Now, when you think of heroes, I doubt that a shepherd is the first thing that comes into your mind. And that's partly because over the last 15 or so summers, we have been bombarded with heroes of the comic book variety, right? Like Wolverine and the Hulk and Captain America and Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, Iron Man, and most recently Ant-Man, which makes me think they're kind of starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel here. But until people stop going to these movies every summer, they're just going to keep churning out more and more. And, you know, there's a lot that separates these heroes from one another. Their personalities vary from brooding to bright, from calm to chaotic. Their powers were acquired through ingenuity, radioactivity, the light from a distant sun, even an insect bite. But despite all of the differences, there's one thing that they all have in common, and that's that we all know from the moment the movie begins, not one of them is going to die, are they? I am the Good Shepherd, Jesus says. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Now, the closest thing that I have found so far to a shepherd looking like a superhero is Bernd Engelroth, and he is on the cover of your bulletin here, leading a flock of sheep in the 2013 Shepherding Championships of Thuringia. I bet you didn't know shepherding was a competitive sport, but it is. And I may have just changed some career paths right now. Every August in Hohenfelden, Germany, The greatest shepherds in the world come together and go head to head for a week of shepherding. And if you go online right now, I bet you can still get tickets for next month's competition if you're interested. Bernd Engelroth looks to me like a shepherd who has seen some action in his day. He looks like the kind of guy whose hands are rough and scarred and rugged. His legs are strong. His voice is thunderous. I think if I were one of his sheep, I would have no hesitation going where he told me to go. He looks like a heroic shepherd. I could only find one short interview with Bernd after he won this competition in 2013, and he was asked, "What is shepherding all about to you?" And he said, "Mostly what I do is take 100 or so sheep who are afraid to go anywhere at all, and I just lead them where they need to be." And that sounds like something that the shepherd from Psalm 23 may have said. I take scared sheep and I lead them where they need to be. Of course, depending on the day, where sheep need to be can look like a number of different things. Most of the time, all they need are simple things: some green grass to eat, some cool water to drink, a couple safe spots to lay down and rest. The Lord is my shepherd. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me along right paths. My guess is the shepherd's happiest, most content moment is when the sheep are allowed to just be at peace in the pasture, when the sun is shining, when the breeze is cool, when all is well. The frustrating thing, though, is that it's when sheep are left in wide open fields that they start wandering off on their own. What are they in search of when they have everything that they need given to them right there? God only knows. Yet there they go, getting lost, getting into danger. So a good shepherd knows that for the sheep to truly flourish, they've got to be moved around. They've got to journey from one field to another field, and sometimes that journey leads to some pretty troubling territory, like high rocky mountain passes or low valleys where the shadows loom large. Wolves and other enemies creeping around the edges, looking intimidating. These are the kind of places that I bet have the sheep thinking to themselves, look, just get me to another pasture and I swear I will never take it for granted. I'll never wander off again. You ever prayed that prayer before? I know I have. One of the things that I noticed this week about Psalm 23 that I had never paid any attention to before is the transition from the shepherd being in the third person to being in the second person, just as things start to get a bit treacherous. Right in the beginning, as the sheep are eating their fill in a green pasture, the shepherd is a he. He makes me, he leads me, he restores me, he guides me. As in, oh, the shepherd, yeah, he's over there somewhere, I think. I don't know, I haven't really kept track of him since we got here. I mean, who needs a shepherd anyway when you've got all this green grass and refreshing water and shady spots to take a nap, right? But then, when the sheep are in the valley of the shadow of death, the shepherd very quickly becomes a you, a thou. Thou art with me. Thy rod, thy shield, thy staff, they comfort me. Thou anointest my head with oil. As in, hey, you, shepherd. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Do you see how dark it's gotten in my life? Do you know where you're leading me? Are you going to be able to get me through this? And it's that last part, that second part of the psalm, that I think really distinguishes a shepherd from a hired hand. Don't you? I think that's kind of what Jesus was getting at in this passage that we read from John, that there are lots and lots of hired hands that can promise us a life of ease, that will sit nearby as we eat, drink, and be merry. But when the going gets rough, Jesus says, the hired hands get going. Popularity can be like a hired hand. Wealth and consumerism are often like hired hands. Power and status are hired hands. They're more than happy to stick around when the sky is blue and the sun is shining, but they're liable to leave us when the storm comes. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I don't think even a champion shepherd like Bernd Engelroth could echo what Jesus claims about himself here. I mean, Bernd is a strong and steady leader when the judges are watching. He can take the sheep left and right. He can make them speed up and slow down and stop and turn around and all sorts of things. But I would suspect that if he were asked to lead them through the valley of the shadow of death, or if he were asked to protect them from a pack of wolves, or to go after even just one that had wandered up a jagged cliff somewhere, Bernd would politely pass. No thanks. Those aren't even really my sheep anyway. What makes our shepherd, Jesus Christ, so much different from the hired hand is that he does consider us, the sheep, to be his own. The story says that he knows our name and that we recognize his voice. There is an intimacy and a sense of deep and immediate care between a shepherd and the sheep that you just do not get with the hired hand. The shepherd ties his own well-being to that of the sheep. The shepherd says, I can have no peace, no joy, no abundant life until my sheep have peace and joy and abundant life. And that's why if one gets sick, the good shepherd anoints its head with oil. If one is hungry, the good shepherd leads it to food. If one is afraid, the good shepherd comforts it. If one wanders off, the good shepherd goes after it. Goodness and mercy shall follow me, pursue me, come after me all the days of my life. What makes our shepherd, Jesus Christ, so good is that his withness endures through thick and thin. The good shepherd never abandons the sheep. He is with us in green pastures, even after we have forgotten all about him. He's with us in dark valleys when enemies are all around. I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Wherever, whenever, whatever, God is Emmanuel, God with us. The Good Shepherd is with us even in death. And I think this is where the shepherd hero diverts from some of those comic book heroes that we've gotten to know. Those heroes use their abilities to overcome the powers of evil in battle, by force, through violence. Their greatness stems from the fact that they never die. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The Good Shepherd's greatness comes from the fact that he submits himself to death on our behalf. Christ overcomes the powers of evil not by force, but by peace. Not through violence, but through self-giving love. By offering his life freely, Christ drains death and evil of all of its power. By giving his life and laying it down, he is able to then raise it up. Now, I know it's doubtful that there will ever be a blockbuster movie about an action hero called the Good Shepherd. There just wouldn't be enough explosions and car chases to draw a crowd. I can't even imagine there ever being a reality TV show about a shepherd that would attract the kind of attention Deadliest Catch or Ice Road Truckers does. Shepherds are just too boring. Shepherds are antiquated. They're from a time long gone. But you know, just because shepherds are old news does not mean that they aren't still good news. Just because shepherds are outdated doesn't mean that we have outgrown our need for a good shepherd in our own lives. Because enemies and dark valleys and other dangers abound, and we need the kind of hero that can lead us through such perils, the way that God has always led his people through flood and famine and exile and persecution. We need the Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ, who can still show us where to find green pastures, where to find cool waters, who can still guard us and guide us, who will be with us, and who will lay down his life for us so that he can raise it and raise each of us anew, again and again. Amen.